Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ginger Hacker, also Andrew, and today I'm very excited to have one of my great friends and one of my mentors that also actually helped me get into the industry about 5 years ago now. Eli, he's a Cyber Threat Intelligence Analyst in the fintech industry, which we learned about in our last video, which you'll be seeing here soon. And yeah, Eli, I'm going to pass it to you for a quick kind of introduction and to say hi.
Well, ask me what my full title is first off. That's the first thing we're going to start with.
Excellent. Eli, can you give us your title or full title?
Titles in this industry are crap and BS and made up and arbitrary. So, funny story. I was in a meeting one time where, you know, we have a couple of folks who are CTIA level 3s, CTIA level 2s, and things like that. And, you know, one person kind of made a comment that, you know, never mind, we're just going to skip that story. Anyway, moving on. Point of the story is this industry has no standardization for what exactly is required to be a level 2 versus a level 3 versus a principal. How many years of experience? What minimum level of education? Do you need a master's? Do you need a CISSP? Do you know what is the actual bar there? This industry has no defining authority. So for someone to sit here and get wrapped up on their title about like, well, yes, I'm a level 3 CTI analyst. I'd like, hey, let me drink my coffee with my pinky out to show you how distinguished I am. That is bullcrap, and I am tired of it. But anyway, yes, I am a CTIA analyst in fintech, which I prefer better than fintech. I think it sounds more distinguished, yes.
Outstanding, and thank you, Eli. So, hey, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have 5 questions. We ask everyone that comes onto the channel. So let's go ahead and get that kicked off. So question 1 is, could you share your journey into cybersecurity and what initially sparked your interest in the career?
So I actually kind of like always grew up on the nerd side of things. You know, certainly, you know, I grew up playing around on IRC chats and things like that. And, you know, I was actually chatting with a friend last night. We were calling the good old days of AOL Instant Messenger and like punters. I don't know if you remember those things, but like they would just like spam somebody with a bunch of like messages. And it would be like ASCII art of like Pikachu or something like that until like finally it overwhelmed the person's endpoint and it just like shut it down and stuff like that. So, you know, the shenanigans of like early day like PHP forums and things like that. And that's kind of what first exposed me to the tech side. But then I kind of went off the rails. I went into law enforcement for 10 years. And I did a stint in motors and started to realize that, you know, I like air conditioning and computers need air conditioning. And sitting on a motorcycle in Arizona, you realize real quick that you want to be around air conditioning real quick.
100%.
And that's about that. So, yeah, that was one side of it. Also, you know, that's just such a hard career field. And editing point. Does your channel know that you're like former law enforcement? Or
yes.
Is that something you really don't mention?
Nope, okay. Totally fine. Because yeah, I initially, when I first started this whole Breaking the Cyber series, I asked these questions on myself. And I've emphasized that I came from a law enforcement background. I've been with the Department of Homeland Security. I'm currently in the military, also part of a cyber protection team. So yeah, full blown covers there. Everyone knows.
Yeah, okay, cool. So moving on, answering the question. And so the other side of that too was honestly, like I realized, you know, it's a hard field. It's just incredibly difficult. And I had a particular case where a kid drowned on me in 2011. And that's when I realized that, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do this forever. Absolutely not. So I think I went back to school at that point. I got a bachelor's degree in business management just because I was like, I need to do anything to move on. And I actually ended up picking up a part-time job working IT. At a local nonprofit down in the city where I was working. A friend of a friend, or actually a friend of mine from high school, he was working there, and I decided, and another friend of mine through the bagpiping community, he actually was working cyber defense and for a defense contractor, and I was kind of talking to him about this one time, and he goes, "Dude, you should check out security. Like, we're nerds. You could totally do it. Like, you've got the mindset." And I was like, "Really? I don't know, man." He goes, "No, absolutely." So. You know, he started talking me into it, and I started looking into, at the time, CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker, because that was like the God level cert. And then, you know, fast forward 10 years, maybe not so much, or 15 years, whatever it's been now. So I was like, yeah, I think I could do this. I think I could make that a goal. So I decided to start like studying for that, and I went back to school at the local community college once I finished my bachelor's degree, and I started taking some classes like the oh shoot, what's that Cisco class? The like basic like intro to networking Cisco class. That's just like it is a heavy duty class. Like
CCNA.
You get introduced to like yes, there we go, CCNA. Okay. So yeah, that was a great intro just to like the network stack and the OSI model and things like that. So, and at the same time I picked up the part-time job in help desk because at the time I was still working weekends
Good
after
old help
almost
desk.
10 years. Yeah, but that's super foundational and important because
Very.
you need to learn things like Active Directory and Windows Server 2008 R2. This is 2011, 2012. All this was happening. And so from there, I ended up moving into getting into more and more cyberly related things. And so finally in 2017, I made the jump full time to cybersecurity as a CTI, or not CTI, as a cybersecurity analyst. And yeah, just kind of jumped into it. And I kind of ended up more in the CTI path inadvertently. And, I really enjoy it. I've kind of like run with it and had a lot of fun with it. And, I actually just finished up my master's degree in intelligence and security studies.
Congrats, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, like, I don't know if you see the shelf back here, but I realized I was really into reading a lot of stuff about intelligence and history and espionage and things like that. And I bought at one point, I'm pretty sure I had every book written by a KGB defector who left after 1990. There was a lot. So yeah, I bought them all, I read them all. And this was at the same time throughout that 2016, 2017, 2018 time period leading up to 2016. And then of course there was the whole election interference in 2016 with Prigozhin and the Internet Research Agency, the Troll Factory. Yep. And I was reading these books from folks like Ladislav Bittman, who tells the story of an incident or an operation they did where they're basically trying to sully the reputations of some West German figures at the time. And, they basically manufactured and concocted this fake scenario to say, oh, look at all these documents we found that prove he was a Nazi collaborator during World War II. And the reason why was they were coming up with the 20-year statute of limitations in 1964. And the Soviets really freaking hated the Nazis, obviously, and they were kind of we're not okay with these guys getting away with it. And so the Soviets came up with this plan to sully these guys' reputations and try to get them at least charged or at least have them lose their jobs, because some of them had grown to be some fairly influential figures in the West German government at the time. Well, anyway, all this is happening, and I say, oh my gosh, this is almost like a modern step-for-step mirror image of what we're seeing with the Guccifer 2.0 hacks and the hacking of the DNC by a hacktivist who's now leaking all these documents, and trashing reputations and things like that. And so it became more and more clear to me that this history of what was happening in the Cold War and the massive amount of intelligence and data that was dumped out after that had direct implications to what we were seeing today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as I was going through reading all this stuff, and I would go on rants like this, with friends and whatnot, and dude, you should write a book or something or become a professor or something. So finally I was
start a podcast.
Started thinking of or a podcast, yeah, or TikToks or something, right? And so finally I started getting into looking at, maybe a degree in Eastern European studies or Slavic studies or something like that. And right before COVID, I sat down with the wife and we were kind of talking about, okay, this is how old the kids are. If I did a master's, it would take about 18 months to 2 years. This is where we'll be then. And it's you know what? No, I want to enjoy time with the kids right now and just go out and live life with them. Well, fast forward 2 years, 3 years, and now it's 2022. And I realized, if I had actually just sat down and done the master's right there in March 2020, like I was thinking about initially, I would have been done. The whole world would have been on lockdown off and on for a year and a half. And I would have had my master's degree and I wouldn't have missed out on any fun family trips because we didn't do anything because the whole world wasn't doing anything at that time.
Lockdown.
So finally in 2022, I was like, all right, I'm doing it. So yeah, and went back to school, did it. And, the timing, it was rough for sure. Especially 2 young kids, 5-year-old and 9-year-old now. There was some trips and, fun things they did, like a camping trip with the in-laws that unfortunately I couldn't make, that, you just kind of got to make those trade-offs. But, today I just spent 8 hours driving around finding splash pads and pools with the kids. We would get bored with one splash pad and we'd go to another. And that's why we started late here today. I'm sorry, because I honestly forgot. You texted me while we were at a splash pad and packing up. But I had the Domino's pizza box I was eating, and I saw your message. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's gonna be closer to 8, bro. Yeah, I'm not making 7 o'clock."
Hey, family's important, and that's the first thing I'll even say is I have a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and the time right now with them being so young, And one blessing is the same thing being previous law enforcement. Like you can't work remote in policing. Odd thing, right? You can't do that over the phone. Can't be like, have you tried telling the robber to not rob you? And
you remind him it's illegal.
Yeah. Did you show him ARS? But being working in IT and having the flexibility to do working from home, hybrid schedules, remote days, it gives me time to be home sometimes during my work week. And my daughter gets to come in like, hey, Dad, hey, what's going on? Hey, I just want to say I love you and give me a hug. I'm like, it's the best part of my day when I work remote. Is just getting to see my kids. They get to kind of come in.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, just wanted to see you, see what you're doing. I'm like, I'm just working. They're like, appreciate it, Dad, love you. And I'm like, all right, what are you going to do? I'm going to go watch My Little Pony. I'm like, good for you, dude. So,
and I have to wonder what curse we are casting upon ourselves in 15 years when these entitled little 24-year-olds are going to be coming in and I'm going to be hiring them and they've seen their parents working remotely since 2020 and they're going to say, I need to work remote. And I'm going to be like, I mean, I feel like the cat's out of the bag now and everyone now is trying like the hybrid thing. But, you know, I feel like there is going to be a interesting dynamic when all these kids who are at home now seeing their parents working from home, either hybrid or full-time, they're going to say, oh, yeah, you can totally do it and be effective. And shoot, I mean, we grew up in gaming online and forming effective communities remotely, like on a global basis sometimes, you know. So, you know, this idea of being able to form community and culture globally online, it's something that we've been doing through Discord, through AIM, through, you know, you name it,
Slack,
for decades,
Teams,
2 decades now. Not Teams, no.
Oh,
Culture does not build on Teams. No, just pain.
Not Microsoft. What? No.
I mean, it's slowly getting better, I think, but yeah.
I won't lie, man. They just did this update, and it's like making my eye twitch at work, or my whole team is very not satisfied. That's all I want to say. Nothing against Microsoft. We use it at work. It's great. It's great in its own way. But anyway.
Microsoft Threat Intel, the Mystic folks. So good. So good. Oh, yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Next question. Or is that, what was the initial question here?
Initial question was, could you share your journey? So.
Yeah, basically, I wanted a career change because I realized I had made a huge mistake in my original career, and it was like, it's time to go. So, yeah.
Well, that can bleed us into our second question, unless there's more that kind of gets into, I think, where it was getting you into cyber. I'll take the drink as a pause.
Carry on.
Excellent. So what does a typical day look like in your role? And what are some of the most challenging aspects of your job?
So the typical day, you know, I do have a queue of just alerts that have generated and popped on like mentions from Telegram and things like that. Or, you know, like there's a new credential dump, stuff like that. You know, that part is definitely, you know, there's a grind to it. Every job has a grind. And me being, you know, diagnosed ADHD and things like that, like if you want me to sit down in the chair and turn the wrench 1/4 wrench every day, a week, so that way the wrench goes around once a week, yeah, that just kind of is painful to me. So, but I realize on the other hand, when I don't have that kind of reliability, I complain that, you know, things are changing too much. So I'm just not happy. I realize that. But that's
there's not enough structure. Too much structure. There's too much structure.
Right. I'm just perpetually unhappy and grumpy, I guess. Sorry. No, so yeah, the typical day, obviously there you got some alerts to deal with. You know, there's definitely a never-ending cascading stream of doom scrolling to do. So a lot of what I end up doing is kind of catching questions from leadership and, you know, giving a response prepared, preferably preemptively before they're even asked. So, and when that does come up, you know, when the question does come down and we already did address it, we can say, here's the ticket. We already addressed it. We already looked at this. This vulnerability isn't a concern. This attack, this new TTP, here's the things that we have in place to address it. So, yeah, it definitely requires you to have like a wider view of the problems in security.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to, you know, recognize that things are gray. They're varying degrees of gray. Not every critical vulnerability is necessarily truly a critical vulnerability. Vice versa, not every medium or major vulnerability is truly medium. Some of them are actually criticals. For example, there was a certain VPN vendor recently who came out and said, this is just a high severity, it's not critical, because exploitation just causes the device to reset. And what they also kind of coughed under their breath there in the like advisory was, that reset will also allow the attacker to, execute remote code. It's like, what? I'm sorry, what? Is this a DDoS? Like, are you just reset the device, or is this like an RCE? No, it's an RCE. So sometimes you got to read between the lines to like understand exactly how severe things are.
It hasn't been patched. No, she's like, oh, what was that? Excuse you? No.
I don't know. I didn't hear anything. So, there's definitely a lot of context, a lot of nuance that's required too, to like the ability to read between the lines and make sense of things. And we also spend a decent amount of time looking through dark web posts and, the forums and the dark web, which honestly, like 90% of it is just, it's like children gossiping. It's kind of obnoxious because if someone's talking about it on those forums, it's typically not necessarily something that is going to be an actual legitimate threat. So I've been kind of surprised lately that there's been so many people posting, I have this huge database, and it turns out actually that happened because of the snowflake stuff. It's like, well, that's a little bit different.
I was just about to ask you like a bleed on question in an inject of like cred brokers. So, because I know on the dark web, cred brokers are a thing. Hey, I have all this data. I have these login users. Is that something you guys also address on your guys' team, or does that go to a different hunt team?
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, no, the like the stealers and credential, like initial access brokers who are like selling off, initial access, and they're like, hey, I have shell access to, a company that has, 20 million in revenue and 300 employees and things like that. Like you see that all day long. And you can sometimes read between the lines and figure out which company it is, or you can kind of like do some Google dorking and figure out, exactly who they're talking about. But yeah, no, that stuff is pretty serious. But that, again, that's in the marketplaces. That's not necessarily on the forums where you've got these like little script kiddie wannabes who are running their mouths, and it's kind of annoying sometimes. Yeah, that's all I'll say there. And then you've got the added problem of the cybersecurity news reporting drama ecosystem, or sewage system, whatever you want to call it, that will start to, hype these things up and rebroadcast them and create FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt. And next thing you know, it's like a headline on Hacker News and dark reading and everything else. And people are freaking out. Oh my gosh, are we taken care of against this? Okay, let's time out. Let's look at the last 8 Microsoft message queuing vulnerabilities that have come out, and let's see what this has in common with all of the other ones. Number 1, none of those have been exploited. Number 2, none of those have public exploitation code available. And number 3, they all require you to social engineer the user into connecting to a malicious server that you control.
Yep.
So why this one decided to explode and get popular, and like some of the Apple vulnerabilities, there was one last year that or maybe it was 2 years ago now, that for some reason it blew up and became a big deal. It was like, why is this one creating so much FUD? It had been kind of a quiet news cycle, so I guess they need to talk about something. But yeah, I was like, this is stupid. So also being able to just again, going back to read between the lines, understand the nuance and the context, and be able to not only understand what's really important, be able to articulate what is really important, because you can't just sit there and say, trust me, bro, we're good on this. You need to be able to explain all the factors, and you need to be able to do it in fairly concise wording that a potentially non-technical person in third-party risk can understand. And so that is definitely a challenge that I've had to work on over the years to get better at, for sure.
Yeah, being able to do a high-level technical explanation depending on who your C-suite or your leadership sits, compared to maybe that someone's just in the role that has really good, what's the word I'm looking for? Management experience, maybe? That maybe doesn't understand cybersecurity of hey, why is this important? Whether have to do that high-level breakdown, that low-level breakdown is very important. And I think that's even going through my career and learning, it's something I'm getting better and better at slowly but surely, because, yeah, there will be even times when we have to reach out to certain users or different teams. And sometimes the teams are cyber-related, so it's I understand I'm talking to an engineer or a software developer, and I can kind of be techie and ask them, hey.
But they can have their own problems too, because they can be why do we need to patch this now? Can't it wait till this weekend? And you're like, bro, this is log4j, kind of no, that's not happening.
Well, it's we have dev and prod. So production, dev environment. Anytime we see stuff in our dev environment, we still actually get alerts and do detections on it. And we're hey, because if they're working on it in dev, it's going to be getting pushed to production. So it's like, hey, we're seeing this in dev. This needs to get looked at. Well, what's just dev? I'm like, well, I understand it's just dev, but my assumption is you're going to push this to production is what your goal is, right? Well, yeah. I'm like, cool. Well, this is what we're seeing and it's bad. So you need to fix it.
I ran Yum update. What more do you want?
Yeah.
No,
like,
you actually
it's not going anywhere.
Applications.
Yeah. So, but then just like you said too, it's like, it seems ad hoc. Like the job that you get into is like, one, you're trying to be ahead of the game on certain threats that are coming down the pipeline. Just like you said too, is like being ahead of the C-suite levels. Like, hey, we already addressed this. Yes, we have. Here's a quick summary. Whether you want the technical or just the 5 Ws, this is how it affects us. So no, completely right.
Yeah, and going back to, getting ahead of things, what I've found is, like on Twitter especially, that's what, for the last couple of years anyway, and I'm starting to see Mastodon slowly creeping in more, but still, I think Twitter is probably like the best spot right now for staying ahead of the news cycle, because that's where stuff gets posted, and that's where, or it becomes notable first, and then from there it will end up on other sources. So having a good feed and like following the right people on Twitter has paid me so many dividends. Like at one point earlier this year, I caught a critical vuln in our product we had to get on within the hour because of Twitter. And like I joke sometimes that like I'm a professional doom scroller, but like, no, you have no idea like how much doom scrolling I do, but it pays off consistently. Like getting, catching the thing and getting it patched and remediated within like an hour and stuff like that. Like, I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's pretty solid.
That's a pretty solid catch time. I mean, if you're looking at MTTRs and all the additional big hot letter words that your C-suite and management's looking at, I mean, like, yeah, to grab something, notify it, isolate it, get a patch for it, and then actually push the patch. I mean, that's solid. I think any organization would be like, wow, patched in an hour? It's pretty, and for a critical, I mean.
You're right, and too, like with finding tools, sometimes it's hard because this big thing comes out and you have to sometimes wait for tools that update hourly or maybe once every 2 or 3 hours to like ingest it and then fire an alert, and then it lands in the inbox, and then you've got to like start looking into it. And from there you've also got other tools that it's like, hey, this CVE just got published, there's no details yet, and thanks to NVD lately there hasn't been details on anything for a long time, so kudos to you guys. It must be nice to just not do your job for a couple months, but anyway. Yeah, we could turn this into a full-on NVD hate session if you want, but
we can have a part 2.
No, yes. How many minutes are we into this, by the way?
We are 22 minutes in. We are not doing that bad.
Oh, okay, good. All right, I'll move along then. Sorry.
So, yeah, you're good. Keep going.
Yeah, but basically, long story short, having a good feed on Twitter has been fantastic.
No,
Next question.
Next question. For someone looking to start a career in cybersecurity in 2024, what skills and qualifications would you recommend to focus on acquiring?
Oh, man, this market is the worst market people are saying they've seen since the great crash of 2008, 2009. It sucks right now, to be brutally honest. And, I was listening to a podcast recently with some economists. They're talking about it's like full-on rolling recession in tech and finance, which that means maybe the rest of the economy is doing great, construction, labor, nursing, things like that. We're losing nurses and teachers faster than we can hire them or train them. And the problem is, on the other hand, we're firing or laying off or just not opening new positions. Or two, there's also, I've heard some horror stories of the ghost job postings where companies want to look like they're growing.
Man.
And so they're posting roles. And it's like, oh, yeah, look, we're constantly hiring. Or, it's like the picky employer that is like, I want the unicorn that can do 3 things, but I want them to get the price. But I want to get them for the price of 1. And it's like, oh, okay. And so, like, a buddy of mine interviewed for a CISO position, but it's not called the CISO. So, there's that. But he was like, okay. They had a bunch of other, like, strings attached to it. And he's like, no, this is ridiculous. So he passed, and he got an offer from him, but he passed on it. And so the role got posted again, and it was 3 months ago, and it actually just got posted again like on Thursday. I saw it get posted like on some like LinkedIn, like was scrolling on LinkedIn, and it's like reposted earlier today or something. And I was like, so I screenshotted it and sent it to him. I was like, they still haven't hired anybody. He's like, yeah, no kidding. And, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty in the markets, and this again goes back to understanding, how does the Federal Reserve rate impact your career aspirations right now? It's tough. It sucks. So honestly, right now, I would say take a deep breath. It's not looking great right now for a lot of folks. Unfortunately, that's just the reality. That being
Yeah.
said, that doesn't mean give up. Keep cranking away, keep building your skills, keep doing what you need to do, and maybe you pick up that survival job bartending in the meantime or something. There's definitely there's you,
I
you got to keep going somehow.
I think
Um,
I think one aspect of it too is just like you said, one, the ghost jobs are 100% real. Like there's been jobs I'm like, oh man, that's like a cool job. Then you post it and you never hear anything back. It's just gone with the wind. You're like, oh, it was even real. But even second is leveraging, like you said, like the market is some say, oh man, like tech's totally going on. Like, dude, companies are in quarter 3, soon to start quarter 4. Most companies are not hiring for quarter 4 because most of the funds have already been expended or have already priced out until the beginning of the next year. I mean, I would personally leverage your network. And if you don't have a technology kind of like cybersecurity network on your LinkedIn or other things like that, I would grow it. First job I got leaving PD into Department of Homeland Security, it was a mix of my network and slowly starting to, I used the military to leverage and getting a master's. I worked and got my Security Plus. That way I can kind of talk the talk and becoming the best candidate when I was applying for these roles.
I did the intro for you for your first job.
You did.
Never mind your network. I got you that job. What are you talking about? You want Grateful Red? No, I'm just kidding.
And 100% though, that's the trick. Like using and leveraging a network, 100% helps.
No, yeah. So to actually answer your question, the 3 things right now, everybody's talking about Gen AI this, Gen AI that. Doing like some free, and there's a ton of free AI certs you can go get, just showing that you're familiar with the tools, you know what prompt engineering is, you're familiar with like the Daniel Miessler fabric stuff and whatnot. Like, dive into that. It's definitely going to be the big thing. 2 is cloud stuff. So
Yes.
AWS, Azure, all that. If you want to dive into cloud forensic, go for it. Spoiler alert, it's just log analysis. That's all it is. They make it, they sound like it's this big thing like, oh, yes, cloud forensics. Oh, you mean
Log analysis.
log analysis? And and then like you find out too that like certain vendors, they give you different levels of logging depending on which license you're on and things like that. And you're like, oh wow, so like this is super dependent and contextual based on the environment. Like you only have 2 weeks worth of logs. Neat. Yeah. So the second thing is do some cloud stuff. Like right now, I've got an idea of something I'm working on, and I had some other ideas earlier this year that I was playing with. I pay for like the ChatGPT Plus because I found it to be fantastic, just for like giving me ideas and brainstorming and working on things. So I've been using it as a tutor to teach me AWS, and like I've set up my own little EC2 T2 micros instance and things like that. And so I'm using that, and now I'm like getting into like setting up an Archemy instance, which is like a full PCAP network analysis thing, because I have an idea of like how I want to like monitor network traffic, and I want to run collections in different AWS regions and see what the differences are as far as targeting goes and scanning and things like that, and see if there's overlap in like different IPs and threat actors and things like that. So yeah, but you could sit down and like do the AWS course and watch YouTube videos of the 11-year-old explaining it to you, which is effective, and I've learned a lot from that stuff. It's time consuming though, and my time is just becoming so much more valuable, especially with kids and life and everything else.
Definitely.
And it's just so much easier to just ask ChatGPT, hey, how do I do this? Walk me through. That didn't quite work. What do I do wrong? Or if you want to go like super big brain, say, ChatGPT, this is what I need. Write me a bash script that will do all of this. Here's the variables I need you to fill in. It's like, cool, here you go. And it's like, boop, I run the bash script, and just like that, like I've been monitoring like a bunch of malware domains and things like that. So like I needed to get certs for all these malware domains, and I think I had like 15, 18. So I had to write a bash script to like do some cert stuff. And so it just like wrote the bash script and just like that, like over a dozen domains now were like working properly and everything like that. It was like,
oh, magnificent.
Yeah. And then the third thing, to your point, networking, go to events, find out if there is like a DEF CON or DC meetup in your area. Find out if there's a 2600 meetup. Realize that there are, especially in major metropolitan areas, there's probably multiple meetups. And you know what? They all have their own vibe, their own culture, and maybe you find one where it's just like, they're kind of like a little bit not quite my vibe. Then you go to the other one and it's like, yeah, they're like, I don't understand what they're saying, but they're good people. Go for the people, because if it's fun people and they like really get you and you get them, whatever that might be, that means you're going to keep going back and you will just pick up stuff through osmosis. You will find good mentors. So if you like force yourself to like hang out with the super cool kids because, oh my gosh, I think these guys are really cool, that's going to get old eventually. I think, at least that's just my opinion. If that's the thing for you, cool. Just recognize how you tick and what's going to keep you going back and stick with it. I would say don't expect to make any friends for the first 6 months, because like my wife and I have this argument all the time whenever we like get into a new kid's sport or something like that. She's like, people just aren't friendly. I'm like, we've only been there for 2 weeks. Like, and everyone's busy, everyone has stuff going, and that includes tech professionals, and tech professionals aren't exactly known for being the most the social bunny for personalities. Yeah, give it 6 months. Just keep showing up. Be consistent. That, what, they look at Joe Biden. He didn't get to where he is by being the best. He just kept showing up.
He was there.
Yeah. I mean, the new girl invented the term Bidening it. Just Biden it, Just keep showing up. And eventually people are like, we'll just give him the job.
Well, and we've given you a few shout outs the last 2 videos, and you can claim it or not, but DC480, Eli is a fantastic member and also helps us associate and plan a lot of the meetings for our gathering of nerds. And yeah, DC480, going to cons like Death Con, Cactus Con, locally in the Valley too. It's where I've met a bunch of my friends and mentors to ask questions to spin off ideas on, to share funny memes. We share job postings. We just have like a general chat. We do meetups on a Thursday coffee call. And it's nice to find people that have like the same niche and kind of same kind of like problems and situations going on, or just same frustrations. And we all just get to talk nerd. And as Eli said, like not everyone has like a Tigger personality like myself. I'm an extrovert IT guy. My boss loves it. Some of my coworkers hate it because they want to just like be a recluse and just get their work done. And I'm sitting there, how was your weekend? What do you want to do for lunch? Any fun plans this weekend? They're like, you've asked 3 too many questions than I'm used to. I'm like, that's asking no questions. Like, exactly. I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think 100% leads into the next question of, especially because we're talking about AI, cloud, and just also networking, is how do you keep up with rapidly evolving landscapes of cybersecurity threats and technologies? And are those specific resources or practices that you find invaluable when learning these? We kind of already talked on it a little bit, but just more specific.
Yeah, no, so I think more importantly is how do you identify what's the rapidly evolving landscape? And what do you like? Because, you can scroll through and like every vendor in the world out there is trying to sell you, this thing will make you the best analyst ever. This thing will make you secure and stuff like that. So rather than like focusing on like one vendor, I think you need to step back and like, I don't know if you're familiar with the NATO Admiralty rating, but if your listeners aren't, you can go look up something called the NATO Admiralty rating. And it's a intelligence framework, or an analytical framework that kind of helps you assess the quality of information based on the source. So do they have direct access? Do they have a history of quality reporting? Do they have a good reputation? Are they saying they saw this themselves firsthand, or are they saying they heard about this from someone else? The same thing when you're vetting confidential human informants, kind of very similar, intelligence process there. Recognizing that, especially in the threat intelligence world, there are certain vendors that are in the trenches, going hand to hand with these guys. CrowdStrike, Mandiant, Palo Alto, those are the big ones. Kroll, there's a couple other out there. And then you've also got these other, and like, unless you've done like IR, doing like ransomware incident responses, I don't think you can understand just how valuable that data is that they collect and see. Because like, the fire service and the fire code was written by people going to the fires. They're the ones who helped us make the world safer. And we can go have another rant about, the modern day equivalency of cybersecurity and why things aren't changing compared to the fire service. How much transparency do we have? How much, transparency? You've got NDAs that are hiding things. You've got, so many issues like that. There's these structural problems. And not just that, but there's also the fact that there is a body count. There is a stack of bodies behind every part of the fire code. why can't I have my grill on my balcony in my apartment complex? Well, because in 1956 in Chicago, 18 people died. So there's things like that that unfortunately I think in cybersecurity, like we haven't done a good job of quantifying the bodies yet. And the healthcare cyber attacks, I think, is going to be what the first place where that starts to become apparent. Because I think the bodies are starting to stack up there, and there's like actual data points and like lawsuits coming out from all that. But to your question, rapidly evolving landscape, how do you identify the like key threats and technologies? Find those good sources, and I listed out a few there. Certainly Microsoft, the Mystic team, and things like that. And also pay attention to what are the big vendors doing, what are the big IR firms and intelligence firms. If you see all of them making a sudden shift, that should tell you something changed in the marketplace. Like 2, 3, 4 years ago, everybody suddenly just got into ASM, attack surface management. Security Trails got bought by Recorded Future. Risk IQ got bought by Microsoft. Like there's only like some huge major acquisitions that were happening. And when you look at like step back and look at the macroeconomics of the marketplace and what's happening, and it's like, oh, everyone is buying these people who collect large amounts of like network traffic and data, and can also go out and like they have like massive scanners. There's one Arbor Networks, I think they got acquired by someone. But keeping an eye on those kind of things, and there's really not necessarily. Right, and you see it kind of casually mentioned, like in the third paragraph of articles, like, this is the third ASM company to get bought in the last year, and then they'll list off the other ones. It's like, ding, 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 pay attention to that. That's a big deal. Bleeping Computer finally caught on and started posting about, hey, have you noticed how like all these edge network devices are getting hit with 0 days because you can't put EDR on it? Oh, that's another key trend that, has been happening that maybe necessarily we didn't consciously realize, but they did a great job of like pointing out, well, yeah, you can't put EDR on this stuff. That's why people are going after the FortiGates, the MoveIts, the Avantis, the PulseSecure. Avanti is PulseSecure, Palo Alto, those kind of devices.
No
specific resources or practices I find invaluable. Honestly, a lot of that comes from just conversations with industry peers, being in like group chats, being a part of the group chat. Don't just be a bump on the log. Like get into Discord.
Wallflowers.
Yeah, which I get. There's a time and place for that. If you just don't feel like you have anything you can offer, but post a meme or something, or heck, ask ChatGPT. This is what the conversation is about. What can I offer? You can
prompt me.
You can outsource your person.
Me.
Yes. If you don't have a personality, you can now outsource it to AI. So yeah, you can come up with something like that. But just being in like Discord chats and talking about it with colleagues and industry peers, that's been another great place to kind of keep up with what's going on.
It's good because it starts to feed the good conversation. And it's like I've been in those chats, like especially when I was younger, getting into cybersecurity. It's like I'd go into meetings and my boss would go in, he'd be asking all these questions. I'm just sitting there like, oh man, that was a good question. Man, that was a really good question. And then as I predominantly grew in my career and I got to be in those meetings at my new organization, I was just like, oh, I know what question I want to ask. And I go and ask the question, and like I get pinged like by one of my engineers, that was a really good question, man. I'm like, yeah, I'm surprised no one asked it yet, because I'm like, I'm sure people are thinking it. And I think a mix of it too is like when you're not the smartest person in a room, or even when you're in a group and like you're getting briefed something, and the portion comes like, does anyone have any questions? And you look around the room and no one has a hand up and no one wants to ask anything. I'm the guy that's like, wow, I have like 5 questions. I'm like, whether they're dumb, bad, or indifferent, I'm like, I'm sure someone's thinking one of these. So I'll go ahead and put my hand up. And I've learned, and I'm pretty good at it. Like I'll ping one of my engineers. I'm like, hey, these are 5 questions I have. Can these be answered offline, or can I ask in the group? And I'll usually get a response like, hey, you know what? Those are actually pretty solid. Let's go ahead and ask them. And if you don't want to, I will. I'm like, oh no, I'll ask. And I'll go off me. I'm like, hey, yeah, Andrew, cyber team question, blah. And they're like, you know what? That's actually a solid question. We'll get back to you on that. I'm like, excellent. I have 3 more. And then I'll go down my little list and like, I'll get little pings on the side. Like, hey, thanks from other teams, other engineers or analysts. Like that was actually a good question. I was thinking the same thing and I didn't know. I'm like, yeah, neither did I. I've heard acronyms I've never heard before. Certain systems I didn't know that we had. I'm like, hey, can I get like a network map of that? Or where does that actually sit? That way I can kind of just review it and that way I just know. And it's just like, if you don't ask, A.S.K, G.E.T, if you don't ask, you don't get. Don't be afraid to ask questions, whether that's in your Slack groups, your Discord groups, talking to a mentor in a meeting. Vent your questions if you're in like a high up C-suite meeting though, because the last thing you want to do is ask the the CISO some question you could just be asking an engineer or something. But to each their own. I mean, do what your rank can handle, as they used to say in the military. So, but yeah.
Do what your rank can handle, because different spanks for different ranks. Well, so it's interesting. What you're telling me is that when you're engaged and like contributing to the conversation and being productive, you get stuff out of it. That's interesting. Like, you're telling me that you get out of something what you put into it.
It's funny, and especially starting this like
profound concept.
Exactly where I'm more or less leading to. It's like when you get the teacher when you learn something and then you get to teach it, I feel like you really retain it better. And it also kind of challenges you, because then once you have to actually teach it, you have to know what you're teaching, or at least like know what you're trying to explain. And one thing I try to pride myself on is, one, I talk stupid. I will bring it down to lowest level where I'm like, hey, why isn't it working? Oh, the internet is not on, so your computer will not connect to the web. Or like, hey, I'm having issues with this. I'm like, well, cool. Have you tried this? Well, absolutely. I've tried that. I'm like, okay. Let's go to the second step. Have you tried this? Like, standardized and systematic. It's kind of like I always like to tell my junior analysts. I'm like, hey, dude, have a system until you have to go ad hoc. But standardized and systematic, you should always have a process. I'll let you hit before you lose your thought.
Yeah, no, so you just said something interesting. You said, I talk stupid. Language. Language and how you speak is so freaking important, and we forget that and we lose sight of it. Let's talk about, where did all the languages come from? According to the Bible, it was this Tower of Babel. For those of you not familiar with it, according to the story, this tower is being constructed because man has said, we're going to build a tower to heaven and we will become like God. We're going to go to God, right? And so God said, no, you're not. And they were all struck with their own languages and they couldn't understand each other. And just like that, all the productivity was lost. The project died on the spot. And like whatever advancements were happening in engineering were instantly lost and gone. There are so many allegories you can take from that and apply to modern day like computing and engineering of like language is so important. If I want to destroy a project, one that has the potential to, take man to the heavens, I will just make everybody speak their own language. Like that will instantly destroy the project. Think about that. Like that's like a 2,000, 3,000 year old story that we've been telling. Have we ever applied that concept to like IT? No, but it's a really interesting idea though. Like that's how powerful language is. So when you're using a bunch of acronyms like, the TCP here, the handshake didn't quite work right. Third party risk doesn't know what you're saying. No, don't say that. Just say, in order for this protocol to communicate effectively, we're going to need this. Like, oh, okay, that I can follow.
Yep.
So anyway, that was another rant.
I'm going to have a whole separate series I think I want to maybe do with like rants with Eli. It just came to me now. But I'm like, I could totally make a separate channel podcast on this, which just rants with Eli. And like, we could just once a week, just talk and just go off. Cause man, dude, I love I love our conversations first off. Two, they're super beneficial, I think. But that will lead us into our fifth and final question until I get to my last little ad hoc one that I asked all my attendees, but we'll get to that. We'll get there. So, who are your role models in cybersecurity or the related fields, and how have they influenced you in your approach in your career, if any?
My role model. So I think probably one of like the first major people that I was ever introduced to is just like one of the big names in security, was Dave Kennedy, from Trusted Sec. He's just overall got a reputation as a good dude. He has managed to keep his nose clean. He hasn't ended up in like any crazy stuff. He is a smart guy. Extremely technically capable, but at the same time, it seems like he can human well. He can talk. He can go on MSNBC and talk about stuff. He can communicate. So, being able to build the SE toolkit and being able to do all that, and also like run successful businesses and things like that. Excuse me. That is somebody who I've kind of aspired to be and say, yeah, and there have been times where it's like, I'll kind of, I'll start leaning too heavy in one direction. And then like right now, I'm finishing up a master's in intelligence and security studies. It had very little to do with cyber, and the bits it did have to do with cyber, it was mainly talking about like national security policy and things like that.
Yeah.
Pure, hard, raw, technical stuff. I realized, I kind of need to tilt more that way. And so that's why I'm kind of like doing more now that, it puts me back in that direction to be more like Dave. So he's definitely a big one that I have found to be quite solid. Trying to think of others. Like, there's others, not necessarily big ones in the like industry, but just some folks who I've seen and met around that they've demonstrated that ability to, be human and funny and a little bit brash and cocky at times. And, it's like, I like the cut of your jib. That was pretty funny. And you got the point across somewhat insultingly, but that might have been more effective than if you had just said it as is. So sometimes you have to be kind of profane and insulting to make it clear just what a bad idea this thing is. And so it's just interesting to see, how that can work in a conversation and how you can use it to your benefit. And, realizing that that might be their style and that might not work for you necessarily. Or, maybe it can. Yeah, industry related fields. Oh, yeah. So the other one I wanted to mention is Twitter. I started following this guy, JD, not Sutton. What's his last name? Can't think of the last name now. Crap. But he's an academic in intelligence studies, and he talks about cyber stuff as well. But he is able to kind of like examine something that's happening right now in like, whatever the latest Twitter drama is, or, big cybersecurity thing. And he's able to like phrase it against the backdrop of like the grand narrative of geopolitics or security questions or national security policy. And you're able to kind of like look at that and say, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't considered it in light of those factors. So, for example, I think he made, and maybe it wasn't him, maybe I'm putting words in his mouth, which I would be careful not to. So to be clear, I don't remember who said this exactly, but this is something like he would say. But like, we've been dealing a lot with this group called the COM, Scattered Spider. They've been in the news quite a bit. They were on 60 Minutes recently. Been working with some ransomware groups. It's a group of suspected teenagers that grew out of like Roblox community and things like that, and doing a bunch of social engineering. And they're now becoming initial access brokers and assisting with ransomware attacks, including the one on major healthcare company recently, like Optum or United, whatever it is.
United Healthcare, I think, was one of them.
Yeah, like I think they're all like the same company. One of them owns all the other ones. But anyway, so yeah, they had all the kids doing this stuff, and there's been some vendors, from what I understand, who have identified a lot of members of this group. Like, here's their Facebook profile, here's their mom's car, minivan, here's the license plate. Like pretty detailed, getting in these kids' business. But either one, they're under 18, so they can't be charged federally. Or two, law enforcement's just busy. They got to prioritize and things like that. And so it's like, so we ignored this issue. It is now metastasized and spawned a huge problem. And not only that, but now they're starting to get into like violence as a service and breakings as a service. Brian Krebs has been writing about this. So what started off as this little group of, young males about 16 to 26, causing problems and becoming kind of like a toxic online gaming community, has now spawned into a group of little like serious violent criminals that are doing in-person violence, kidnappings and extortions and things like that, as well as this whole other, branch of cybercrime. And so that's been, just the commentary about looking at that one issue and how we didn't nip it in the bud and how it's been able to grow. Being able to look at that issue and look at the, way it compares to the overall ecosystem has definitely been a fascinating skill of his. I think it's not JD Power. JD Power is who does like the car awards and stuff. It'll come to me as soon as we end the podcast.
We'll get the name updated before I post. It'll be like JD ... Here's the name he was thinking. So we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, man. But
anyway.
I think, and it's seeing those groups, like this is where I put my law enforcement hat back on. Like when I moved over from law enforcement, I dealt with my victims were whoever called me for whatever problem they had. And one way that when I kind of moved into the cybersecurity aspect of it is like, it's still very much rewarding. But however, the aspect of it is rather than your victim being a citizen or whatever city or county or state you work in, it's the organization you work for. So anytime something happens, your employer is your victim. And I mean, like, it's kind of like a mentality I kind of keep of like when I'm working these events or working cases, my victim I'm protecting is my organization. And I mean, but 100%, like you see these shitbags, all these people from these APTs and other
alleged
shitbags, and all these other organizations and just all these threat actors that kind of doing all this like evil stuff and stuff like sextortion, ransomwares, credential hacking. I mean, sapping people's bank accounts dry. It's just like, And it's hard because exactly it's a federal crime. Not many cities and states, I think, they're slowly starting to integrate more and more at the actual state level. And I have to actually look it up to make sure I'm not quoting anything wrong as well. But it's like if I were to call my local police department and say, hey, I've just been hacked. I think I have ransomware in my home. They're not going to send a police officer, I think, out to, they're going to.
Well, yeah, we'll have detectives working on that in shifts.
They're ideally going to say, well, you need to call the FBI because that's something that we don't do at the state level, which stinks, which I hopefully, I think further down the road, there'll be something at the state level that they can kind of, which I think may or may not ever happen because it's a federal issue.
That'll never happen.
But it just stinks, I guess, on the lower aspect of things. It's a lower hanging fruit, and it's just like unless you reach out to a company or some type of third party, or you have cybersecurity insurance, which is a whole nother video that we'll have to talk about one day. I mean, you're kind of on your own, and it's just like there's a lot of folks that even when I was a police officer, I had like, hey, my daughter got this phone call that she had to. Her computer was weird. Then she called this number and they made her go buy like 5 $100 Apple gift cards and then scratch the back off and give her the number. And then they just hung up. I'm like, yeah, you just got scammed. Like, well, what can you do? I'm like, I can't do anything. Your money is gone. Here's a report, but you can kind of reach out to Apple, but they're not going to do anything. So, but anyway, that is our 5 golden questions I ask everybody. My last question for you is, what are some things you like to do on your free time? Are there any kind of video games, anything on the tail end? I know you finished up school, but what have you been doing on your free time? What do you like to do to kind of unwind, or anything been eating the midnight hour?
Oh man. So I've got like multiple scale models overhead, like hanging in my office. I've got more in building. I've got, so many of those. I do like to do 3D printing. Let me think. Do I have any prints around here? No, I took them all out for something else. But yeah, no, I've been pretty busy with like playing with 3D printing and stuff like that. My kids love the magic box that toys come out of in the garage. It's like, hey, look, toys don't just grow on trees. They come out of the magic box. Okay, you're right.
That's awesome.
I also been getting like really into Legos with the kids and stuff like that. I found the Alibaba and Wish, and you can get like the knockoff Legos, super cheap but super cool stuff. Like, look at this guy. Tell me that isn't amazing. Little tactical Lego dude right there. Like, tell me that is not the coolest thing. You get like a bag of them for $15 and everything else. So, yeah, mainly right now, especially post school, I'm just kind of cooling the jets and resetting and recalibrating everything. But I also play bagpipes, so being a part of like a community musical group and doing that has been quite fun. But I've been doing that for about 25 years now. So yeah, just having that pursuit to like, and really honestly, like the model building and 3D printing, it's just like all creative pursuits, just to kind of like be expressive and kind of like let that creative piece out and fly. I'd like to get into writing, especially because like I've done all this like consuming of information. It's like, okay, can I turn around and can I start to create? And so I've started creating presentations and submitting talks to conferences and things like that. So I'm doing Bue Team Con in September. I did a presentation or I'm doing a presentation on a bunch of malware domains that I collected over the last couple of years, and they intercepted all the traffic that was like beaconing out to them, and a bunch of other weird stuff happened along the way. Of like, I found out there's like a whole ecosystem of people like trying to buy these domains too. It's pretty wild. But but kind of like the creative pursuit there is merging the technical and the creative, and it's like, hey, I see there's kind of like a little bit of a void in the industry of what do we classify a malware custom domain, malware C2 domain as, and so that's something I'd like to get more into, and also like again just like merging the technical with like the geopolitics side of things, and how do socio-technical systems play into the grander narrative of interstate relations, diplomatic relations, and things like that. So it'll probably be public by the time this gets published. But I've been picked for a panel at Bletchley Park in England in November.
Oh, snap!
Oh, yeah.
What? That is sick.
Yeah.
In person?
So yeah. So I'm going to England. So like they had a call for papers, and I'd been working on a paper at the time that I thought would be a good fit, and just a research project and stuff like that. And so I told the wife, hey, I saw this and I thought, how cool would that be? Like, there's no way. So yeah, I got selected and whatnot, and so it's like immediately the imposter syndrome went into like overdrive, and I was like, there's no way I can do that. I gotta back out. And I was like, shut up. They picked you. They picked your subject. It fits. And, the other guys on the panel, they're like all PhDs teaching at like the King's College and things like that. Like hardcore, legit, lifelong academics. One of them has written some stuff about cyber stuff too. So I'm like, okay, I can probably see where my background and like their backgrounds probably like align a bit. But they've been like hardcore academics their whole career. I've been more of on the practitioner side. So, I'm kind of thinking about maybe the PhD bug is kind of been gnawing at me, and it's like, should I?
Dude, jump on it
try
now.
To get published a little...
Jump on it now if you're going to try it. And that's my personal opinion. I had the same thought process when I decided to go for my master's. It was like, I got done with my 4th degree, and I'm like, sweet, I have a bachelor's. I'm never doing school again. 5 years later, I'm like, I need to do a master's. Did my master's. I'm like, do I want a PhD? And my wife started telling me, like, you will not be doing a PhD right now. I'm like, I will not be doing a PhD right now. So, but, that's cool, man. Yeah, that's exciting.
Oh yeah, I'm stoked. It's super cool. Yep. Yeah, so I can't wait. I think that goes public on Monday. So
sweet. Yeah. Well, hey, I appreciate that's all I got. So I guess any last pieces of advice, I guess. And one cool thing too is you'll be getting a piece of the Ginger Hacker swag. So you'll be getting a shirt sent to you or hand delivered depending when I see you next, since we're both here locally in Arizona. And, but yeah, man, I always appreciate having people come on this channel and kind of getting to share their stories and stuff, their origin story, as you want to call it. But any final piece of advice before we kind of sign out to any young breaking into cyber individuals, or even want to do that career change, like any kind of thoughts or advice?
Man, so many thoughts have just flooded through with that. First off, thank you. That hoodie looks amazing, and it looks just like you too, with like the gorgeous high cheekbones and the fluorescent blue eyes and everything like that. It's the spitting image of you, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't realize this until later on in life, but I read somewhere that you're on average going to have like 2 to 3 careers, and I realized, oh yeah, my parents both did. Like my dad was in the Air Force for a while, and then he got out and he got into IT stuff. My mom was she was secretarial work, and then she became a nurse. So don't be surprised if what you thought you were going to do shifts and changes gears. A lot of people have that story. You'll probably find that one career lends itself into another. So for the longest time, I felt like I was I couldn't possibly change careers because this is what I need to be doing. This is what I've said I'm going to be doing. And you know what? There is nobody sitting there with a notebook keeping track of if you change careers and want to be happier doing something else, or if this one is like toxic and killing you. Like there is nobody, that 20, 40, 60 rule. At 20, you're worried what everyone thinks about you. At 40, you stop caring what everyone thinks about you. At 60, you realize nobody else was caring about you the whole time, So, yeah, just go where what you're good at. Because the stupidest thing we have going right now in this society is this idea of follow your passion. Well, of course, Jeff Bezos thinks that books are his passion. He was good at, creating an online bookstore, and that became his passion because it paid him. You know what? This intelligence stuff, turns out I was good at it, and that's kind of become my passion now. Just collecting this information and, maybe in another 5 to 10 years, becoming an academic is going to be my passion, because I'm finding like, hey, I can kind of do this. I can kind of write, and I can kind of like articulate things and, form ideas and, rant about the Tower of Babel and how that applies to modern day IT. Like, maybe that's going to turn into my passion. I don't know. But long story short, do what you're good at and chase that. If you really want to get money and do it, find something with very low unemployment and chase that you're good at. But I digress.
Well, everyone, that is going to be our part 6 of breaking into cyber. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you have so far this long, as always, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification, and you'll be seeing that next video when we drop. So as always, keep hacking.